I am thrilled to be moderating another NTech Roundtable, this one on water regulations and emerging contaminants, how utilities are preparing. And to get started, just a caveat, this is the small print. We're not experts. We all have different abilities, experiences, different knowledge for these regulations. But any questions we don't know, we know the people who do know. And we'll definitely take your email, take your phone number, and get back to you with the answer or whoever we know to make sure all your questions are addressed today. So to introduce my panel, lots of diversity here, which I love. To start off, this is a formal occasion. I get to wear this today. I'm Christine Gonzalez, and I am Senior Project Manager and Storage Tank Queen at NTech Engineering. And I've got 26 years of experience in the water and wastewater industry. My colleague, Rod Horvat, he's the Regional Director of NTech's Pittsburgh office. He's got 27 years of experience in water and wastewater engineering and municipal engineering. And this is his second roundtable. Kim Mazer, he's a senior project manager at NTech, and I've known him for years. He'd always call and we'd chat about tanks and inspections and stuff, and we continue to work together on tank projects. Kim's got 33 years of experience, so he's our senior member today. Tori Morgan, she's been with NTech since May as a compliance coordinator and senior project manager, and she has 30 years of experience in the industry. As far as folks outside of NTech, we've got Kevin Morley. He's a manager, federal relations with the American Water Works Association. You know it as AWWA. And he has 20 years of experience in environmental policy. And finally, Ron Milkey is an account manager with Eurofin's Eaton Analytic, a testing laboratory. And you've probably seen him at AWWA conferences. Just yesterday, he was mentioning Water Jam down in Virginia and how sad it is that we don't get to do these conferences this year, and hopefully we'll get to do them next year. But he's been around for 30 years, so I'm sure you've seen him out at those conferences. So what we always like to do at the start of our roundtables is we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you, the audience, and understand, well, in this case, what are your top concerns? What are your top water regulatory concerns? So we've got a bunch of different ones listed here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 different ones listed. You can pick as many as you like. And if you could, put check marks next to which ones you're most concerned about. If it's all of them, go ahead. But this will really allow us to be able to focus in on what matters to you guys and focus our conversation and stories around these things. So we tried to cover a bunch of different potential topics and things that are changing or of concerns to our clients. So I'll give you another 5 seconds to post your answers. Yeah, at this point we've heard back from about 70% of the people, so a couple more seconds. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And okay, I'm going to end the polling and I will show the results to everyone out there. So we'll share the results. Looks like the number 1 was lead and copper. And I'm never sure, like as a scientist type person, often the top one ends up being the number 1 result. 3, 7. Also looks like Pfas, not surprising there. That can be a very costly problem if you're dealing with that. And important to know, okay, what are we going to have to deal with? Okay, and also the drinking water infrastructure needs survey and assessment. So it looks like those are our top 3. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much for giving us your feedback. Let's see, I will stop sharing the results. Put that away. So to kick things off, well, let's, our audience tell us what they want to hear about. So lead and copper rule. Who wants to take the lead on that? Sort of where are the regulations in regards to that? What are people supposed to be doing and what's on their horizon? What's coming up? Yeah, go ahead, Tori.
Well, Christine, I'll start things off and keep it very broad. The long-term lead and copper rule revisions have been out there for a while. They were proposed in October of 2019. Their expected publication, I believe, is due out by the end of, and Kevin might be able to chime in on this a little bit, by the end of the month, he's looking at his watch, tomorrow, I don't know, maybe, but soon. And the impacts of the long-term lead and copper revision rule are kind of far-reaching. So, where it really starts to impact some of the water systems is obviously with the lead service line replacement inventory and replacement requirements that will happen. I believe they would be initiated over the next 3 years once the rule is final. I believe that's the intent of it. So that's going to be huge for water systems. There's a lot of water systems out there that don't have a completed lead service line inventory, and that's going to be crucial. So if there's anything I can suggest to anybody out there within having a water system, if you don't already have a lead service line inventory, I would suggest getting that started. That's going to be the biggest endeavor for you. And it's going to entail also working directly, depending on how your system is set up and where the line ownership starts and stops, working with the homeowners, because once lead service lines are determined, I believe they're looking at a full replacement, not partial replacement. So this is going to mean a lot of interaction with the homeowners. This is something a lot of our water systems, for many, many years, we haven't really had to deal with. I mean, we deal with what is ours, and that's it. From the, whatever the homeowner owns in, they took care of. Now it's going to need to be a bit of a cooperative effort moving forward once this policy changes to ensure that we have a complete replacement. Kevin, I saw you shaking your head because I knew that the rule is probably going to start kicking in here soon. You might have some more insight as to where we stand on that.
Yeah, we do notionally no promises, right? It's Washington.
No promises.
Kind of in the weird season of Washington, but it is anticipated by the end of September that we will very likely see the final rule. One thing I think that you noted that we do have some general certainty of is that a lead service line inventory will definitely be very helpful and a key piece of this. That's probably one of the least controversial elements of the rule. How some of the other elements of the rule sort out relative to what was in the proposed rule remains to be seen because we haven't seen it. But that lead service line inventory and some of the programs that we've been working on with EPA and other partners about reducing lead levels in drinking water in schools and child care facilities. There are some proactive steps that utilities can take to engage those key stakeholders in the community about this. There is some, for those that have been following the rule, there is some aspects of there that would have some provisions that would capture responsibilities, if you will, that may be a little bit less traditional in terms of schools and child care centers. Not quite sure how that's going to sort itself out. But again, and then, there's some other protocols that we reasonably anticipate in terms of, corrosion control optimization that just kind of enhance what's in the current rule, but are they're really critical for utilities to begin thinking about. So we'll have real details sometime in the next several weeks.
Now, when you say that you're expecting the end of September, that's when the final rule will be released. What does that mean? Like October 1st, owners have to do this and this?
No.
What they need to do?
Yeah, usually there's a progressive kind of,
I think it's a 3-year phase-in.
Awareness phase, right, to get the states prepared to support implementation, and then allow utilities to take different actions to begin doing various compliance strategy shifts, depending on what those are, over the next several years.
Okay, and I'm curious. Okay, so something that no matter what, every water utility should have this inventory. What's the cheapest way to get one? Rob, Kim, either of you guys see any clients, and what have they been doing? Kim?
Well, some of the information that I've been reading, trying to follow the rule is there's a couple different ways to go about it, and they all have their pros and cons. One is you can do have the customers get involved to see if they can do a survey of investigating their own, water service, where it comes into the house, what kind of material it is, some of those details. Obviously, there's pros and cons there of the data that's coming back to you, but that's one option to do on a large scale. The other one would be for the water companies to use their own forces when they're replacing meters, if they're going to do inventory at homes, that they go in and they actually get information about the water service that's coming into the house that way. Other things that I've read are, what Kevin was talking about is focusing on the schools and facilities where children are gathering, focus on those commercial accounts, actually go in, schedule appointments, investigate what kind of service line that comes in. So those are things that I'm reading about.
Okay, Rob, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, and I think the most important resource in that kind of thing is talking to the guys that are out there doing the work. A lot of those guys, they know where the bodies are buried. They're the ones who are out there and get a sense of where things are. The other thing, interesting enough, a lot of systems have old valve cards that were handwritten from decades ago that are sitting in a file somewhere. It's crazy how accurate and how what a wealth of information those are. But it takes effort. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about either going out and going into everybody's house versus sorting through a stack of note cards, it's a great place to start. At least give you some idea where you're at.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you could just find someone, it's essentially data entry, like having a good database, data entry by someone who understands how important this is, so there's some accuracy there. Once you got that, then you can check and see where the gaps are and fill it in. But yeah, that's I envy people who've got all those old records. Tori.
I think I can't remember who said it, either Rob or Kim, when you're doing like meter replacement or meter reads or line fixes or repairs, it's important at this point in the game that your team is aware of what to look for. And if they're not looking for it, educate them on what to look for. You can also get some lead line kits to determine, if lines are lead or not. Start doing that testing out in the system if you have an exposed line, so you can know exactly what you have out there while the ground is still open. This is all so crucial because as this thing really starts to roll out, it could be very costly and expensive for utilities to be doing not just the inventory, but then also the replacement should that be needed. So the more information you can start to gather up front and know what you have ahead of you, you'll be better able to plan for the final decisions that are made to meet those requirements of the new rule. So.
Okay. Back in March, the only conference I got to this year and got to give out hugs was the Southeast Pennsylvania AWWA one in Exton. Almost 200 people there. But one of the things we had was a roundtable discussion, and Bill Murray with the city of Reading, he poignantly explained that their policy of replacing the homeowners' lead pipes, they're doing it for free. And he said, it's not about goals or regs, it's about our kids, disadvantaged neighborhoods, and people. And that just really, really stuck with me. Granted, it costs money. So it's got to be this hard decision of, okay, who's going to pay for it and just where are you going to get the money for it? So what are you guys seeing out there, Tori?
Well, and I'm sure Kevin's going to be able to chime in on this one too. There's a variety of different financing opportunities out there for utilities in regards to some of the requirements that are going to be up and coming with the lead and copper revisions. You've got the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. HUD has some funding available. There's the Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. I believe there's, I don't know if there's other opportunities out there. Now exactly how you go through the motions to get that funding, or if that funding applies to your particular project, I don't have the details, but certainly we could help assist anybody who might be looking at those. But there is some funding out there. You may have to dig for it, and you also have to remember every water system out there is having to do this. So that's why we bring up all these things, because you need to be as proactive as possible. That funding, there's going to be a huge demand for it. So I'm not sure how much of it will truly be available.
Good point. Other ways, Rob, go ahead.
And you know, again, I'd say probably it's certainly within the last 3 years, you know, we're planning for waterline replacement projects with clients, and a big part of the discussion becomes, you know, where are their lead services? So, you know, they're kind of targeting areas where they can go in and replace a main that needs to be replaced, but there's also lead services, and those areas with lead services are getting bumped up higher on the priority list now. In particular, like I said, definitely in the last 3 years, people are starting to pay a lot more attention to it, you know, in light of what's kind of happened in the environment here.
Okay. I guess part of it is sort of detective work and just having a sense of water systems, like knowing when houses were built, and gives you a sense of when the lead lines would be there, or if you find some in one neighborhood, you know that the rest of the neighborhood probably has some. I'm almost thinking it sounds like there's a good opportunity for subcontractors who can go around and identify these things for water utilities. Has anyone heard of any subs doing that sort of thing?
There's definitely firms out there that do that.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember the name of one we utilized, and it's not coming to me. I apologize. Once I figure it out, I'll send it out so you can send it to the whole team. But there are definitely firms out there that are doing, you know, not just the lead service line inventories, but also the testing requirements if that's something that utilities need assistance on. So.
Okay. So, but back to the funding, Kevin, I know when we were talking back on Tuesday, you had some input in regards to funding and what people may want to consider or be aware of.
Yeah, well, you know, in this sense, you know, obviously there's rates and things of that nature, right? But in terms of how to get some of the capital, you know, the WIFIA program has been very well funded, and the leveraging ratio is exceptional. We worked on that program a very long time, and so certainly that will be leaned into, I'm sure, by many utilities. And SRF programs are available on that as well. You know, there are potentially some interesting challenges related to those fundings, and depending on the state you're in, you know, sometimes, you know, mentioning the case that you were, the gentleman that talked about the program they have in their utility, but, you know, in some cases there are instances where, you know, doing work on the homeowner's side of the property is strictly prohibited by law. You know, it's a gift of public funds. And so, you know, totally separate subject, but out west, yeah, they have conservation programs where they give you a low flow toilet and stuff like that. And then there was a whole conversation about, you know, well, the utility needs to claim that to the IRS in gifting that. And, you know, when it comes to money, there are always, other provisions that need to be taken into consideration. So in some states, maybe not in your operating environment here in the Mid-Atlantic, but there may be some challenges of doing some things for free, if you will, on the other side of the meter box, if you will.
Yeah.
So that creates some challenges from an implementation. So certainly, and you know, if the homeowner refuses to let you on his property, you know, that creates a different conundrum for the utility from a compliance perspective. So, you know, there's not a clean solution to all these things, but it's going to be a work in progress, which is why utilities will have some time to work through some of those implementation strategies. So,
yeah, I mean, a big part of it is it's PR and trust, having your customers trust you that they're trying to do something good for you. And like, I wondered, did the Flint, Michigan thing, did that help educate people or just scare the shit out of them?
Maybe a little.
You know, I think that there's a little bit of a polarization associated with it. But again, in other communities, right, one of the strategies has also been, you know, hey, look, you know, this is going to be a couple $1,000, amortize it over your bill for the next, 5 years or something like that. So, I mean, there are different strategies that different utilities have employed to help, move the ball along in the cost methodology that they use to deal with this. Because, ballpark, back of the envelope, this is like $30 billion, infrastructure price tag. Not
Kevin, in any of the discussions, have any of the water companies thought about hiring, like actually going out and bidding and hiring plumbers as like a subcontractor to do the private side work? Was that ever brought up?
I'm not as intimately involved in all the things associated with lead and copper rule. That's quite possible, Ken, but I'm not going to rule it out. But I'm not as deeply involved in some of the case studies. But we can backtrack on that and get some information to you. Looks like Ron might have a response.
Ron?
Yeah, Christine, I'm since I'm more of the public figure at this point and just work in a lab, it's funny you say that about scaring the shit out of people, because I really thought that Flint, Michigan was going to open up the public's eyes to see and to think what they're drinking, but it seems like I think people still don't want to know. And it's amazing when you talk to water system or utility companies that say they drop off the bottles at homes for them to take their own samples, and they're still not doing it. I would think it's a free service, get it done. But, and again, I hope that doesn't branch into a whole different subject, but it's funny you say that, because I really thought that was going to just, everybody's eyes going to be wide open. I need to find out what I'm drinking. And it's not seem like that's happening. And don't know if any of the other panelists think anything about that or know of anything, or what their kind of opinion is of that.
Part of it could just be they're drinking bottled water, so why should they test it?
And that's
And
true.
that pisses me off. I'm like, well, granted, if your water system gives you good water,
Yeah.
with Pennsylvania, and I drink it right from the tap, and I love it, and it's yummy. It's what made my iced tea today. And also, like, we work with them. We know they take good care of their system. Well, at these smaller towns, and it's hard to maintain everything, then I get it. It's hard to, but I'm always yelling at my friends, stop drinking the bottled water. You're wasting your money.
Funny thing is one of the first times I went out to see my big lab in California, Monrovia, I talked to the lead analyst out there for the microbiology department, and she told me with the amount of bottled water samples versus tap water samples they've sampled, she'll never drink bottled water ever again.
Ooh.
Yep, and we do all the bottled water for a lot of the major companies in the United States. She said, I will no longer drink bottled water because of what I've seen. And now you got in a whole nother subject is microplastic studies that they're doing. Who knows? But I know.
Tori,
But tap water is definitely the way to go. You're right.
I was just going to echo what Ron said. It's interesting from community to community. In my previous role, I dealt with projects across the entire United States. And, in some of those projects that did the water testing, the lead and copper testing throughout the distribution system, we had an extremely difficult time. In fact, we got to some points where we had to almost we had to pay people for them to give us their sample.
I've heard of that.
I mean, absolutely we did. I mean, there's a lot of, and I think it comes back down to a lot of it's education and understanding. And I think that's going to be ongoing for us in this industry. It can't stop at Flint. I mean, and now they put a rule in place, but are we still giving good outreach and good education to the general public? I still think that there's such a misconception, just like you said, Ron, on bottled water. I mean, I don't know if people truly understand the difference. I don't know if people understand the amount of testing that goes into their drinking water and all those things. And I think that's probably, why you get a lot of people who hesitate to participate in some of these studies. So, I honestly believe that education and outreach is going to truly be the most important thing to address some of these contaminant issues we have across the board in the United States, for sure.
Kevin, you're going to say something?
Well, so, I mean, to your point, Tori, you know, we actually just completed a national survey on consumer confidence, if you will. And, you know, it's not 100%. I'm not going to kid you on that, but it's relatively high, pretty close to about 80% had a very high trust or confidence in the water that they're
Well,
providing.
that's good.
You know, I think to Ron's point, you know, sometimes I think that, and this is kind of like politics too, but, well, it's not my congressman, it's all the other ones.
Yeah.
I trust my water system. I don't know what they're doing across the street, right? But I don't really care. I drink that water.
Yeah.
But, you know, but clearly based on those findings too, and there's, I think, a piece in our journal about it, along with some stuff in our upcoming virtual summit, but that will unpack it in more detail. But you know, there's clearly areas of opportunity with certain communities as well, where there's a clear lack of trust, and some of that is likely compounded by, you know, the findings in Flint and things of that nature. But you know, it's not all good and it's not all bad. It's an opportunity for improvement,
Right.
You know, in terms of how the utility engages, and certainly the lead and copper rule will be a big piece of that, because of the lift and the requirement on the utility, and there will require a level of engagement with the community, which is probably a healthy thing in the long term anyway.
So Kevin, that survey you mentioned, did you survey utilities, or are you surveying?
No, this is a general public. This is like, you know, a whole
I'm like utilities.
national survey. Yeah, this was a Morning Consult was the firm that we work for. So it's a pretty, you know, very large sample set.
Okay, excellent. But you know what, just a reminder to our attendees, we are taking questions throughout this. We want to focus on your biggest concerns, your problems. If you have comments or you have ideas, you have solutions, please type them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we do have a question from Pat Burke. So Pat is with NTEC, and he asks, Pennsylvania PUC was considering allowing regulated utilities the ability to earn on replacing customer side service lines. Does anyone know the status of the PUC's policy on this issue? Rob or Kim, any idea?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't either, but we will certainly find out. I think that should be relatively simple to find out the status on. So if you could just document the question, Christine,
Yep,
we'll get the answer for Pat.
We'll get you an answer, Pat. Good question. Okay. And another question, and part of the part of the problem is that people don't want to pay extra on their monthly bills for better water, and municipalities are not always willing to raise rates to make improvements. So it's a long-term problem that we're all seeing, and like I always admire the municipalities that make regular rate increases. I mean, that's the only way you can do it. I mean, it's no different than our cell phone service bills going up.
You know, Christine, on that same note, you know, without a doubt, water is probably the most important asset that a community has. And compared to all the other services that are provided by a municipality, it's the cheapest. I mean, it truly is in many aspects the cheapest thing that we're able to provide. But I think along with that, we come back to that whole education thing. People have to realize and understand what's involved with providing clean water and meeting different regulations. So it's going to be an ongoing thing for communities, the education piece, in order to move through these regulations for sure.
Yeah, actually, it looks like we got an answer from Tom Klein, one of my new good friends over at AWWA, who was on our tank mixing panel 2 weeks ago. Tom mentions, I was under the impression Act 120 passed and was accepted by the PUC. So we'll check on that and see if that's the answer to Pat's question. So again, attendees, please, we'd love to get your questions, your comments, your feedback, just like that. So, you know, pretend we're all at a conference, just hanging out. So we'd love to hear from you. So keep the questions coming in. So one question I have for you guys is it easier if you're a smaller utility and trying to get your hands wrapped around the whole lead and copper thing? Or is it easier if you're a big utility? Or is it actually just easier if you're private? Like, or is it depend?
I don't think it makes a difference one way or another. I mean, because it's all relative. I mean, because it's all circles back to a budget and finance. And, you know, you're a bigger utility, you have a bigger budget. You're a smaller utility, you have a smaller budget. You still have to make the financial, you know, vested interest in the project. So it is what it is. You know, and as far as staffing and the availability of people to start doing it, bigger projects usually have more people. Smaller projects have less people, but they have less things to look at. So I think it's just relative. I think it's going to be a difficult undertaking by everybody. It's going to take a lot of planning and a lot of thought and budgeting to determine the best way to meet some of these rules.
And Tori, I think you were correct earlier with talking about just the communication and education. And I think it needs to be done on the one-on-one level with the water water companies. I think a lot of times these kind of roundtables, and we have participants here, but I think we need to have these roundtable discussions one-on-one with the water authorities and with the townships and boroughs so that they understand, you know, clearly the regulations that are coming down the pike and the effort to comply with them. I think by educating them, it will help them make the adjustments in their budget. Because right now, a lot of times they don't fully understand or know what the operators in the field are dealing with as far as the regulations go. So they're just kind of like, well, we don't need to raise rates, everything's fine. You know, I don't hear anything from my staff. So I think if we focus on really educating the boards as to what's coming down the pike and the level of effort, I think it'll help them make those budgetary decisions.
Absolutely. Good point, Kim. Sure.
Another question I had, are there any systems either here in Pennsylvania or anywhere in the country where you're seeing them doing a really good job? And what are they doing? Anyone you admire out there?
Well,
Oh, you just don't know.
I will say, I think New Jersey systems are ahead of the game. In most of the United States, they've been very diligent at initiating some of these requirements even before they're final, and the planning of it. There's a variety of different facilities. I can't necessarily rattle them all off at the top of my head, but you know, and everybody goes about it a different way. I think what really is going to drive how much it's going to cost and the level of effort comes from that inventory. Once you get that inventory done, that's what's going to determine what you have to do, how you have to do it, how much it's going to cost, and how long it's going to take. That's why, you know, we kind of started things off when the big question today was lead and copper rule. You know, inventory. That is really where you've got to get things started, and that's really going to drive how you really manage the entire project.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and speaking of, you know, the top topics as chosen by our audience, the second top one was the PFAS. So let's run through the same sort of thing. Are there rules and regs for it right now? What are the changes coming down the line? What are we seeing? Who wants to take the lead on this one?
Oh, I can.
Oh, look at that. Everybody's jumping on that. It's the second four-letter word behind lead.
Ron, I know your company does testing.
Yeah, this subject I have given presentations on, and it's.
Oh yeah, you just did one last week or a couple weeks ago.
Well, that was on ECMR, but I've done PFAS. I attended a one in Chesapeake area, a PFAS seminar last week. And I mean, this is something that it could be discussed for an hour easy. I know you don't want to do that, but if anyone here has not seen it yet, I highly advise you to watch a Netflix documentary called The Devil We Know. And it is what the movie Dark Waters is based off of. And I've seen both of them. The Devil We Know, I think, is the Dark Waters. They kind of Hollywoodized it a little bit too much. But The Devil We Know on Netflix is an amazing documentary. It really is like the Aaron Brockovich, but it's just really powerful. It's a powerful documentary. You see the effects of PFAS. I personally, at this point, am getting almost a little bit PFAS out, because when, being in the lab business and doing this testing, I really want to attend all the PFAS presentations at every show. Well, I've been attending them since 2016. That's where it started in the Northeast. And I think September of 2016, I went to Water Jam in Virginia and asked them about PFAS, and everybody was looking at me cross-eyed, like, what is that? They had no idea what it was. So it did take time for it to get down there, but you can go to a conference just a couple of years ago and see back-to-back talks about PFAS. The only problem I'm facing now is everyone gives the same 10-minute dissertation of what PFAS is, and everybody has to do it. But I'm thinking really soon, you're not going to have to tell everybody where it comes from, because everybody knows at this point. But, we've been doing extensive testing for it. A quick summary of it: method 537 was the initial one, and it was part of UCMR 3. Now they're starting to institute other methods. 537 can analyze drinking waters, wastewaters, groundwaters, soils, everything. Well, now they're starting to create new methods, method 533, which some labs are certified for now. Some states are actually certifying for that method. That is strictly a drinking water method. It analyzes up to 25 compounds rather than the 18 that the 537 did. So there's more compounds. But it's just, I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that, but it's something I love to talk about, because again, I've been dealing with it 4.5 years now, but it is it's still, even with this COVID stuff, I still get stuff about PFAS from other publications, because it still has to be talked about because of how important it is and how problematic it is across the United States.
What are you seeing?
So I'll just kind of come in top level here from the federal perspective, in that in March the agency did propose a positive reg determination for Pfas and Pfas, right? So that initiates the process, which arguably can take quite a long time, but my understanding from my colleague Chris Moody, who really handles this issue for us day to day, there's like 33 states that have either passed or in the process of passing some type of regulation associated with this class of compounds. In addition, I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of losing track of time in 2020. It's kind of warped. There is a requirement under the toxic release inventory, where a class of the I guess I would call them the higher profile perfluorinateds, are required to be reported under the TRI beginning this year. So that, depending on how that happens, that'll help illuminate a little bit some of the potential sources, which gets to, to Ron's point, where some utilities may or may not thought they had stuff in their source waters or wherever, may want to begin to examine some things. And there's a number of other, regulatory related activities in terms of health effects and other things that the agency will be going through to support that, regulatory determination process and how it works its way through the system over the next couple of years. So,
Sorry.
To kind of piggyback on what Kevin said, he's absolutely right. Like there's many states out there that have initiated their own plan to address PFAS. New Jersey already has a PFNA limit. I mean, there's already different states that are doing different things. And I just wanted to let everybody know there is a website out there. It's called the Interstate Technology and Regulatory Council, the ITRC. If you look that up, they have a phenomenal spreadsheet that they update, and it'll tell you every state, you know, what they're doing with PFAS, do they have a limit, where their regulation stands, you know, all that kind of information. It's a huge amount of information if you're interested in knowing what other states are doing with PFAS. As far as Pennsylvania goes, we do not currently have an MCL in place. We're looking at the, you know, obviously still the EPA health advisory limit of the 70 parts per trillion. Pennsylvania did initiate in 2018, 2019, the drinking water sampling plan for PFAS. They started sampling, I think it was 360 intake sites across of Pennsylvania. They had picked the high potential sites for PFAS. And I did get some results off the website from PADEP. You know, as of, now this was a while ago, they might have some updated results, but as of October of 2019, they had collected 96 samples in Pennsylvania. 67 of those were non-detect and 32 were detectable. So, you know, they're addressing, you know, how to handle the detectable sites, you know, directly with those sites, and, you know, still are considering how to implement potentially an MCL moving forward. But that's kind of where Pennsylvania's at. With all of this, I just thought I'd throw that out there because I think the majority of the people on our call today are Pennsylvania related.
Yeah, and actually any of the websites that we mentioned today, any PDFs, links, that sort of thing, what I'll do is afterwards, within the next few days, we'll gather that information, and all attendees, I will email it to you, as well as our other upcoming roundtables. So you guys will have all that information at your fingertips. Ron?
Yeah, so, and when it comes to time for the analysis of it, you know, when UCMR3 was first came out and they had method 537, you know, our reporting limits for the 6 compounds were anywhere between 20 parts per trillion and 90. At the time, the health advisory was 200. So if you're getting, you know, less than 90 for one of the compound, reporting limit of, you know, 90, you know, now the MCLs are set in the teens. So we personally, to go back and look at every single piece of data to see how far below that the curve it went and below that reporting limit. So now you're seeing down to 2 parts per trillion. So it's a huge difference. It's 10 times lower on one of the compounds, but the other ones, it's more than that. So when you're seeing down to 2 parts per trillion, the amount of UCMR3 results that were supposed hits, you know, you can maybe double, triple, quadruple, whatever, 10 times more. If you actually reporting at that time to 2, now you have all these other systems that were positive. Now, I do know in the state of Jersey, you know, we have been analyzing for since 2019 for PFNA. Now, what was weird about that was, I don't know why they did PFNA, because PFOA and PFOS seem to be more common, but they decided to target PFNA. And we weren't getting too many hits. I don't know the exact numbers. Again, we weren't the only lab analyzing, but it actually was a little, we were kind of happy that it was higher than we thought, because we thought that there was going to, or it was lower numbers of, I should say, instead of higher results. But now they did put a limit now on PFOA and OS. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but there's something in Jersey called the PWTA, which is the Private Well Testing Act, which was instituted in 2003. So every home that's sold in the state of New Jersey that has its own well has to get tested. And that way the buyer and the seller knows about what the water's like. Well, just September 1st, they added PFAS to that. So every single private well, is going to be analyzed going forward for PFAS. Now, of course, the homeowners do not like that because the price of the testing just went up considerably. But it's, you know, it's volatiles, it's nitrates, and normal basic stuff. But they did add PFAS onto that in the 3 compounds, 3 most common ones. So Tori, when you said about New Jersey with the water systems they are being very proactive with this. And, you know, again, I felt honored that I live in Jersey and I'm going to these conferences talking, and I'm saying Jersey's the only one certified, or, you know, or only one that's regulating this compound. And I'm a little surprised that Jersey at this point still is the only one. There's a lot out there that are right on the brink, but they're not
Well,
there.
there's some other states that have limits in
Oh,
place.
there's a few other
Yeah,
states. Okay.
there are a couple others. You know, Ron, you bring up a point about the wells, because I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm gonna say this, I hope I'm right on this. I believe Pennsylvania still doesn't regulate the construction of private wells, and I don't know how that relates to the testing. So, you know, that might be something we see shift with PFAS and some of these, you know, contaminants across the board from a private level, because I don't believe that they are regulated in that manner in Pennsylvania at this point.
No, most states don't. No,
Nope.
you're right. Mm-mm. And there was a lot of pushback to do that in Jersey for the private wells, of course. But you know, again, I don't know who's right or who's wrong, but it's just they made it go through, and it's for the 3 compounds now.
So I'm curious, Rob and Kim, are you guys seeing any of NTEC's clients dealing with PFAS issues at this point?
No, I have not seen any at this point. I think it's, you know, kind of out there yet, so.
Meaning that they haven't done enough testing to know for sure?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the western region where I am, I haven't seen much. I mean, even just looking at the map of where the hits are, I was aware of a handful of these, but yeah, nothing that's really impacted anybody that I'm working with right now.
Because in some cases, it is sort of regionalized around certain types of industry, or where it's just the pollutants that gave us these problems. So I guess we're lucky in a lot of areas of Pennsylvania that it wasn't that, there's other crap in the ground, but we don't have to worry about this right now. So that's
down in North Carolina and Lower Virginia, that's where the Gen X came from. So that was huge down there. So you're right, it's very regionalized as to where there's been hits, and I guess that was attributed to UCMR3. But again, UCMR3 only targeted 6 compounds. Now they're saying there's a couple thousand man-made PFAS in the world. Couple thousand. I know, it's never ending. It's insane.
And aren't we going to see those? We're going to see another round of PFAS contaminants in the upcoming UCMR5.
Yes, so that's something that if we wanted to talk about that with COVID, I did find out that that is part of it. They think they're right now the newest version of UCMR4 parameters is like 40 regular contaminants, and then there's like, I think close to 40 PFAS. So they may target them because now you can get down to 2 parts per trillion, and maybe they will decide to target more of them and not just the 6. So that's definitely been discussing. I've heard rumors that UCMR5 might only be PFAS.
Oh boy.
But again, that's, you know, it's still a couple years away, you know, before they even complete for UCMR5.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for UCMR5, what they're looking at is the proposed is supposed to be out in 2020, and then the final late in 2021, starting sampling in 2023 to 2025.
Yes, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Other comments on PFAS? Okay, and as an engineer, I'm always curious. There are ways to deal with this and, you know, protect your water system or protect the water going to your clients. I'm hoping technology is getting better and cheaper to be able to do this as it, you know, as more and more utilities realize this is an issue. What are you guys seeing out there as far as solutions for water utilities?
In most of the conferences I've attended and seen just in webinars, you know, they are giving presentations on RO, ion exchange, and GAC treatment. So they both, you know, and every time you see a presentation on that, they give 3 examples of them, and they still don't know which is the best, which is the cheapest, because every water system is different and every level is different. So yeah, it's definitely 3 different methods of it, and all these companies that produce those chemicals and put those systems on. I do know that one company last year at Tricon, which is a Chesapeake show, that was in August. I talked to a gentleman there that I believe worked for Calgon Corporation. He said he wasn't going to be able to supply his clients with any systems until September of this year. It was 13 months they had to wait to even, oh yeah, because it's so huge between getting the GAC, the chemicals, the systems. And then I'm sure this COVID just absolutely annihilated anyone that was planning on getting it anytime soon.
Anyone
Yeah,
else seeing good, interesting solutions out there?
that definitely, Ron is right. I mean, those are the three main ones, and I know for a lot of the facilities in New Jersey, you're exactly right. They were waiting to get this because the manufacturers can't keep up with the demand for the different sites that are going to need them. So, and it is a very limited amount of treatment opportunities that can treat this. So,
Yeah.
Okay, as far as other topics that were high on the list for our viewers, they'd also mentioned the drinking water infrastructure needs survey and assessment. Help me out. Who's requiring this? What's involved? What's it about? Is it something they should have already done or something they need to do? Tell me more. Who can tell me more about it? Tori.
Well, so this is what I do know. So I believe the drinking water infrastructure needs assessment, they're done every 4 years, if I'm correct. It should have been completed.
That's the cycle they're supposed to be done.
Right. It should have been 2019. But I think because of everything happening with COVID and there were delays, I'm not sure if COVID was the reason. It's now for 2020. It's the way I understand it, to put it in simple terms, it's like the census of water. It's like the population census, but for water. What it does is it's providing information to I believe it's EPA, to the federal government on the needs for water treatment plants and systems, what kind of capital improvements they'll need, all, maintenance needs, everything. And then what those numbers are used for is to determine the drinking water state revolving fund budgets for that time period. And they look at the info is used to determine the needs for public water systems for a 20-year period. So this one would be from January 2020 to December of 2039. So, I think it has the same concept as, like I said, a census. It's so important that utilities complete these because that really is what's driving the funds that are set aside for drinking water system needs moving forward. I'm not exactly sure. I tried to dig up some information on when the actual survey will be coming out, because I don't think it's out yet. I don't know, Kevin, if you know more about that.
I don't think it is yet.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. And I believe we'll start to see some more information coming out about the survey. And then there will also be, I believe, some training sessions on how to complete it. But I think as all of us in the industry, I think it's really, really important that we emphasize the importance of completing this survey to all of our clients and anybody we know who's in the industry, because it really does impact the overall funding that's available.
Okay, interesting. Rob and Kim, do you guys have experience in being involved with this in past years?
I've never been asked to assist with one, to be honest.
I mean, so is it something that's easy for the utility to do?
Yeah,
I've never seen one.
no, never seen one either.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really looking at, as we said, it's a little bit of a capital kind of projection of, how much pipe, a lot of it's been focused on, your kind of vertical infrastructure and getting into, the replacement, how much pipe you think you're going to be putting back in the ground, or new construction versus rehabilitation. And, it allows to use some projecting. And, AWWA did some work on this this was 2012, a report we developed called Buried No Longer, where we projected based on a smaller sample set, but a similar kind of aggregation of data, $1.2 trillion infrastructure need over the next, 25, 30 years. And having that information between that and what's in the needs survey, which is a little bit different slice of the pie, if you will, does inform congressional engagement on things like WIFIA and the SRF program. And it you know, lends some insight on where that capital expenditure is going, right? And what will be interesting in this round, I think there will likely be some information about that service line.
There is.
What are you thinking you're going to?
It is. It's new in the survey
we can
this year.
really capture, you know, attempt to capture the actual projected burden.
Yeah.
Which
Well, that'll be
inventory is helpful.
Yeah, it is. That's what I raised my hand. I wanted to
I don't
say.
want to go back into the lead.
Yeah, I saw you went
rabbit
full
hole.
circle. I think, and you know, that would lend us all to believe, because it comes back to that other question on funding. So in the survey for 2020, I don't believe it was in the prior survey. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but I don't believe it was. They are going to be asking for estimates on lead service lines. So if they're asking the question, it would make you think that if they're asking the question, are they going to be considering funding to be available for that particular, those needs? So, I mean, you can be hopeful.
EPA doesn't give the money.
Well, I mean, but the funding, I mean, if they're looking at that as a potential need and source, and they're gathering the information, you would hope that when the money is budgeted based on the survey information, that would be an area that would be considered for a possible funding project.
But you're putting a lot of thought into how
She's
budgeting is
positive.
done at the federal
It's like a
government.
big ray of sunshine right here, Kevin. Come on, this is the
It's
way
like
it's gonna
this.
work.
There was $100 million last year. We're going to refund it at $100 million. And
Well, in 2015, here's another stat for you. In 2015, the survey showed there was $472.6 billion needed to maintain and improve water systems across the United States. If they're including lead now, there's got to be more money. I just think, can you take that back to your
there
people?
will be more need. Does not mean there will be more money, right?
All right, I'm trying to leave everybody
I'm
with some really
starting to
happy
burst your
thoughts.
bubble.
All right.
We're making the pie, the need pie, bigger.
We're just cutting it up more, right?
Oh my God.
Well, we're still trying to pay for it with a little pie.
All right. Anyway, I tried, everybody. I tried.
No, that's good.
Well, just so to keep things moving along, we're going to have another poll right now, and I want to reach out to the attendees once again. We're always curious what your concerns are just about water in general. So we've been doing these roundtables for a couple of months now, and actually I'm going to allow the panelists to vote as well on this one. So for this question, we're asking you, what topics are of most interest to you for future roundtables? It's multiple choice, so I'll give you 30 seconds. We've got one of the favorites. Everyone really seems to like beer with an engineer.
Hey.
I have a feeling that
Evan, are you going to get
ready
some
for
shirts
that
for
question.
everybody? Are those
I'm
like
not an engineer, though.
they're the free giveaway today?
Well, it's one of those things where we're trying to recreate the conference feel. And, you know, after a talk, you grab a beer, there's a happy hour, and you talk about things. So we think it'd be a lot of fun to, you know, pull some people together with common interests, whether it's water or wastewater, and just have a dialogue like this. So I'm hoping that one gets a high score, so we can do that. I'm just not sure would the DEP give me credit for that or not.
You gotta frame it right, Chris.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do
Testing
marketing.
enhanced water.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll give you 5 more seconds to respond. We've got about 2/3 of the people have responded so far. Any more answers? And okay, I'm going to end the polling now. Let's see the results. Oh, okay, so it looks like, and this was the next one we were planning on the water side. Pat Burke from our office is going to take the lead on this. He's already got 1 or 2 people planned for the panel. Rob, I'd love to have your input on this, but unaccounted for water, best practices for submetering and leak detection. So it's the good stuff there. So thank you very much to all the attendees who helped us with that question. And back when we started, we had 8 different potential topics. for that we could discuss today as far as regulations go. And one of the things we want to do is make sure we still touch on all the topics. So I'm going to do something very special right now, which is the lightning round.
That just scared me.
Yeah, we are high tech here. There's sound effects. There's everything. Rob's already been through this one. So we'll just take like 1 minute per topic and run through these. And anyone who's got some good, useful, up-to-date information, shout it out or raise their hand. So one of the topics was AWIA. So that stands for America's Water Infrastructure Act. Who's on top of that and knows what's coming up for that? Yes, Kevin, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, here, it's right here.
What do you got?
Keep it on my desk, all marked up. This is the actual statute. So all systems serving greater than 3,300 community water systems, including wholesalers, are required to meet a certain compliance deadline. And we're coming up on there's two parts. One is the risk and resilience assessment and the emergency response plan, both of which need to be certified, not sent, certified that they've been completed to EPA. Large systems had that round in March. They'll certify their ERPs here at the end of the month. And then medium systems, 50 to 100,000 deadlines are December and June. And then small systems is June and December of 2021. So key for small and medium systems is you need to get started right now. Yeah. Wait, because you're just going to make it harder on yourself. And there are some really good resources that EPA has developed and AWWA has developed for all systems, including some materials that we've recently completed specifically for small systems. And I can send you a link to that stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll send it out to all the attendees. Excellent. I'm curious,
and
Rob.
Don't forget cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity.
I get that in there.
Right, it's critical. Rob and Kim, is this something that as engineers we're helping out our clients with it?
Yeah,
Rob?
Absolutely. Yeah, okay. We've got some in-house experts at NTech that are I think Marcy is very much involved, and Rob, I think Nick in Rob's office is very involved with this too. I've done a little research in the beginning. I know it's I was involved with the vulnerability assessments that were done years ago, and it's kind of a part 2 version of that. And again, the biggest thing with this is the interactions with the client. There's a lot of interactions and feedback and consensus, with the client in filling out and going through this process.
Rob, anything to add?
Yeah, Matt, actually Macy's working on a lot of stuff out of our office, but yeah, it's and Kevin said you need to start on it now. This isn't something that's necessarily a difficult exercise, especially for an owner, but you got to get through it. You got to get through it. There's a lot there. It's a pretty comprehensive requirement, especially when you get into some of the planning aspects of it. So there's some thought you got to put into it, and there's a lot of information, especially for these medium-sized systems. It takes some effort, and it's going to take some time to pull everything together.
Okay, excellent. Next topic, boom! We're moving on to startup of schools and businesses after COVID-19 shutdown. Now, I know I've seen different organizations release ideas, programs, what you should be watching out for, but essentially we're just concerned about water in the system and it hasn't been turned on in 6 months. Am I right? Tori?
That's right. And I think there's some really great guidance that's been put out. We can certainly share that with everybody on the call from AWWA. They've been fantastic. And then also from the CDC. Another thing that's been a concern with the shutdown of businesses and schools for so long and their water systems haven't been running is Legionella. So, they're also trying to make people aware of that. So there is a way to do a proper flushing program before getting people back into the building, before starting operations. And we can send guidelines on those if anybody's interested, for sure.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay, excellent.
I'm curious
Next one.
if Ron has some lab work that he's observed related to that? Bringing built buildings and back online.
Yeah, so one of our labs is doing wastewater testing on COVID, but that's it. There's no methods that have been developed yet for drinking water COVID, but they are doing wastewater testing right now.
And actually, my boss, Brian Killian, and one of my colleagues, I'm forgetting now who it was, gave a talk last month, and it's up on our website. It's on testing wastewater for COVID and technology being used. So it's a half-hour talk. It's fascinating. You can find it on our website or on our YouTube channel.
We're doing Europe also is doing it's called a Safer at Work program, and they're doing testing for countertops, anything like that. So it's pretty neat how they're doing pretty much everything, air testing and everything, just not drinking water yet, nothing on that yet.
Okay, so next topic, boom, UCMR4. Oh, I know when we were talking to Kevin, he had mentioned, actually Kevin and Ron both have some insight into what we're seeing, so some of the results. Kevin, what are we seeing with that?
Well, yeah, after we chatted a little bit, I kind of went back and looked at the data a little bit, and I'm sure Ron has better insights than myself. But, you know, I would say that the two that kind of jump out a little bit are probably manganese and the HAA5s. From a manganese perspective, I think based on some of the data that's early available, roughly 8% of those samples are greater than 50, which is the secondary standard. You know, where color and aesthetics become an issue. And then, you know, ballparking here, about 3% are greater than Canada's standard of 120. And so, you know, that threshold is based on neural effects. How the agency, you know, moves through on making decisions associated with that, you know, remains to be seen. But those would be the two. I don't. Ron may have better insights that seem to have an occurrence level that might potentially drive some activity.
Yeah, so for the course of the almost 30 months worth of data, germanium's not going to be concerned. Manganese probably will be, like you stated some of those numbers. Cyanotoxins almost sound like a waste. Only 4 samples out of thousands came up above total microsystem level because they were doing finished water, not raw water. So there's not going to be concern with that. None of the organic analytes are going to have problems. The O-toluidine and quinoline may be a little bit more than 1% of the public water systems had some detects of that. So that may or may not lead to some regulatory action. And like you were saying, HA5s, that was pretty high. Now there's no MCL for HA9 or for the brominated acids. Those numbers were pretty low. For the 60 for HA9, only 4.3% of the samples were detected above 60 micrograms per liter. So that's kind of like the conclusion. So it's the only one I'm like, it took the lab so much effort to get certified for method 544 and 546, and yet not certified, I'm sorry, approved by the EPA for those methods. And yet we wound up only doing a couple samples for method 544. And now you have water systems wanting us to continue to use that. But unfortunately, that method was developed for finished water, not raw water. So if your raw water is kind of dirty, that method wasn't geared towards that. So that's the one that just kind of annoys me as a lab person, that we went through all the trouble for 2 labs to get approved for them, and yet we ran 1 sample for both labs, 1 sample, and that's it for 544. So again, that's kind of a quick summary of the UCMR cores.
Anyone else have Rob?
I just have a public service message in regard to the UCMR program. Even though it stands for unregulated contaminant, if you see something in those results that pay attention to your results. If you see something that doesn't look right, do a little bit of homework on it. Do a little bit of follow-up sampling. It'll save you a lot of headaches in the future, or could save you a lot of headaches in the future. I think I've had 2 now where some activist got a hold of previous UCMR testing results for an authority, and went to the press with it and made a big stink over it and
Oh, wow.
headaches. So, they had to go back, and the question was, basically they were called out in the public, why didn't you do anything about this? And the answer that, well, it's an unregulated contaminant, it didn't fly. So, you see something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, a little bit of follow-up testing goes a long way, particularly with some of the stuff that maybe you're not real familiar with. Plus, it could be an indication of something else going on in your system. So, again, just learning from the experience of another one of your fellow water systems in Pennsylvania. Yeah, you see something that shows up on UCMR testing, follow up on it, do a little diligence just to make sure that there's nothing really there.
Rob, it's very interesting you say that, because when it came time for the regulatory testing for PFNA in Jersey, we gave the water systems the option to target 12 compounds. And then when method 537 kicked in, we could see 18 compounds, and we gave them the option, look, same price, we'll target 12 or 18 instead of 2 or 3. And it's amazing how many of them said, no, just do the one. And that was scary to me or weird to me, but here's what also happens, and here's where money comes into it. Per the methodology for 537, if you get any detect for any targeted compounds, you must analyze the field blank. So I think the water system said, okay, if you only targeted one and there's no detect, is below reporting doing that, then you don't have to do the field blank. But if you're only, your compliance compound is PFNA and PFXA gets a hit on it, now it triggers the do the field blank, and we have to charge the water system for that. So they were saving themselves a couple $100 by only targeting one compound. Yet, I'm thinking if the public finds out years later that they had the option to target 12 or 18, they didn't, and there's another problem, I don't know. So that's where me as a lab guy was like, don't you want to know? But I don't work for water systems, so I don't, what do I know?
Yeah, but guys, I see we're up against a timeline. We still have a few more things to discuss. I know Kim had a comment. I want to wrap things up and just give our attendees a chance to get our email addresses if they're curious or want to contact any of us. And also note thank you to my coworkers who mentioned it was Dan Fortek who helped out Brian Killian with the presentation on COVID-19 in the wastewater. So quick wrap up here as far as future roundtables. Make sure you check them out. You should be getting e-blasts from us like every 2 weeks or so. If you're not, check your spam folder. You get stuck in spam. But future roundtables, we've got 2 on wastewater in September and October. We've got a fun one, trusted advisor, hired gun. This is boards and owners and engineers working together. And then just check out our website. I mentioned we've got more water and wastewater ones that are coming up in November, December, trying every 2 weeks, and then into the new year. So to wrap things up, big thank you to my panelists. Tori Morgan, thank you. Rob Horvat, thank you for coming back. Kim Mazer, wonderful to get your expertise on this. If you do want a PDH certificate or water operator CEH, please email me in the next couple days. I'll make sure you get that. And then a huge thank you to our other panelists, Kevin Morley with AWWA and Ron Milkey with Eurofins. So I'm going to leave these up for a couple minutes, but as far as my panelists goes, we were just talking about UCMR 4. Kim, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I know I wanted to touch base a little bit on something that Tori was talking about with the schools.
Yeah, what was that?
Yeah, I do know that every water system has a sampling plan that's approved by DEP on where they take samples from. And if 90% of those samples are taken from businesses, and if those businesses are closed and you've got to move that sample point, I know DEP has been asking that you please contact them on how far you're moving it to get that sample, and is it still representative of that sample site. So, my comment would be make sure you check with your DP sanitarian on if you're moving a sample site that's not on the plan. And also I've seen regulations about if you need to do a public notification on I need to do a boil water notice because we're doing a main replacement. They're asking you to put specific language in those public notices that says this is not a COVID related public notice. They're making sure that that's on all of those things. So just so it doesn't alert people to like, hey, why is this happening? So the boilerplate template is, this is not because of COVID-19.
Okay. Tori?
Yeah, and that's great information, Kim. And PADEP has a great website. They've been pretty good at providing some really detailed information and templates. So I'll get that website address to you, Christine, that you can share out with the group. It's got templates for all those different things. And, you know, you had brought up about the sampling plans. With the new lead and copper rule, sampling plans are also going to be one of those things that utilities are going to have to go back and relook. Their historical sample sites, you know, might have to rethink those. They really have to start going to the sites and doing the sampling that have the high potential with lead service lines, things like that. So that's all going to be changing. Absolutely. Good point.
Okay, and last topic we had, Tori, I know you know what's coming up and others may as well. Managing, testing, and reporting. This is stuff that's already required, sort of a laundry list, a few things to watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to mention, you know, there's just a variety of things. It could be water or wastewater. We already talked about some due dates Kevin did about AWIA coming up. The consumer, the CCRs, the consumer confident reports, the proof of distributions are due no later than October 1st, if you haven't had them in already. The next AWIA upcoming due date is September 30th. Kevin had mentioned that one. You know, you shift over to the wastewater side. You have your 503, your annual 503 reports due in February 19th. You know, March 1st, you have your Tier 2 right to know reports out. I just wanted to throw out some of those dates. I can let you know that we are working on providing a pretty comprehensive overview of all these different compliance requirements that you'll be able to have access to.
Is that the bulletin board?
The bulletin board. It's a secret, but it's coming. It's very exciting. Look at everybody on here pretty much knows about it.
It's really cool.
It'll be super exciting. We're thrilled to be able to roll this out to everybody soon. And it will include all of that information and more at your fingertips, so that it makes it easy for all of you at your utilities and your businesses to not have to do all the research involved with determining where we stand with some of these regulations and due dates. We'll do that for you. That's where we are.
Excellent. Okay, any final comments from my panelists?
You know, I'll just throw one in there real quick for y'all because it's not water quality related, but it does definitely get to utility operations and construction. So it hasn't been released yet, but not getting into the background, but the nationwide permit program has come under some scrutiny legally in consultation on endangered species and whatnot. And so the Army Corps will be issuing a new proposed rule on nationwide 12, which gets into, you know, all kinds of right-of-way maintenance and construction projects that, you know, disturb small footprints. And so if anybody is engaged in that, you know, or uses that and would like to comment, I'm happy to, you know, get you involved in that process to review as we develop comments on that over the next couple months. So just a request for volunteers.
Tori, or were you volunteering?
No, I'm not volunteering.
Wow.
But for Kevin, I would volunteer if he needs something. He knows that he really did us a good one by showing up today. We really appreciate him being here. I just wanted to mention this isn't really applied to our utilities direct, but if you have manufacturers or construction engineers or people doing work out in the system for you related to lead. The lead-free rule with EPA was published on September 1st of this year. It applies to manufacturers, importers, that they certify that their products meet the lead-free requirements. It really is making sure that we are moving towards an entire lead-free, environment. So I just throw that out there. So if you have big projects coming up, or if you're dealing with particular distributors or vendors, I would assume they all are in touch with this, and that's what they're already doing. But it's always something to keep in the back of your head to make sure that they're using lead-free products.
Okay, excellent. Yes, Ron.
And I have one really quick, I know we touched on it really quickly, UCMR 5, but it should be noted that every water system over 3,300 population served must do UCMR 5. It was 10,000, over 10,000 served. Now it's over 3,300 for UCMR 5. But anyone under 10,000 people served will not have to pay. The EPA will continue to pay for them. But 3,300 and higher is going to be mandatory testing for UCMR 5.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's wrap things up. A big, big thank you to all my panelists. Huge thank you to all our attendees. Almost everyone stuck around even after the 75 minutes. There's a thank you. And the way I always wrap these up is that magical things happen when you bring together passionate people. And I definitely think we saw it today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See
you.
you guys.
Thank you.